Good morning. I can see there are a number of others joining, but I think we might get underway. So welcome. Today we're going to address the challenging and most important topic of digital transformation. This area is relevant to every organisation in the country and indeed around the world. Every company and every government is challenged with the transformation from what has been to what constitutes the future. And I'm delighted to see such a variety of participants today, many of our clients and people joining from large companies, the government, local councils, startups, and across almost every vertical. To our clients, great to see so many of you again. And to those of you who are new to the strategy group, I issue you a very warm welcome. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what we do, quick introduction. So with Australia's oldest, longest standing innovation strategy organisation. We focus on innovation strategy in all of its forms, and most of our clients are looking for innovation for growth. Customer strategy is really significant at the moment. We have a number of projects going on around customer strategy. Most organisations talk about putting the customer at the centre, but very few actually have some substance around that. And it's certainly an area that we love to work in. Business and digital strategy, which is a core topic for today, is key. And we'll talk significantly around transformation with the digital lens. And we've been branching out into employee strategy. If you think about what's happened over the past 18 months, certainly everyone's been working from home, working remotely, working in the office. And from an employee perspective, there's lots of productivity gains and gains around office space and so on. But what's that employee experience? And in many ways, the journey, the tools that we use to determine customer experience are very similar to the tools we also use now to determine the employee experience, from when that employee or team member is thinking to join an organisation to when they've joined and in fact their journey and when in fact they've left. So 4 pillars: innovation strategy, customer strategy, business with a digital lens, and employee experience. And all of this is, taking a design-led approach. What I'd like to do is focus today on 6 key topics. I'll set the context of why transformation is essential. I'll look at some of the common pitfalls that organisations fall into around digital transformation. We know this is not easy, and we'll talk a little bit about why it's so hard. We'll spend most of the day talking through a framework that we really like at the strategy group, and we'll give you tools and give you some tools and methods and techniques to use. We'll talk a little at the end around galvanizing the organisation to embed transformation and why that's essential. And then I'll cover off some tools, and we'll also, in return for giving up 45 minutes of your time today, we'll send you some tools from our toolkit later on today. Let me start with setting the context. And, it's a slide that I use often. Some of you may have seen it before, but it's so relevant. What got us here won't get us there. And, I continue to view this as really fundamental. Many organisations have done okay. Many organisations that you're with have, gotten through the pandemic. What got us here, the lights are on, the business is okay. The question is, will what we're doing get us there, whatever there actually means for you, public sector, private sector? And most smart organisations are revisiting this slide. Will, in fact, what we've done get us to where we need to go? We've got consistent disruption happening around us, and we need to significantly take a step back to understand what does there mean, first of all, and how are we going to actually get there? Because in most organisations that we work with in our client base, competitors are coming from outside the industry. The traditional competitors, everyone knows what the traditional competitor does. Many are public companies, it's all in the reporting. Companies hire from each other. That's not the issue. The thread is that the competitors are coming from outside the industry, and we're seeing more and more of this And for most organizations, and I put it for you, this should be a real issue to address. We talk a lot at the strategy group around strategy from the outside in versus strategy from the inside out. And what does value mean? And I continue to emphasize that there's one definition of value, and that's value that's in the eyes of the customer. People talk about, financial value and our growth and our stock turns and our hiring strategy. To a customer, all of that is immaterial. The only value that counts is the value from their eyes, from their lens. And so it's important to take a design-led approach to actually put yourself in their shoes to understand, what strategy from the outside in means. Because a lot of us, most of our clients, most organizations we see spend a lot of time talking about strategy from the inside out. Why you should like us and why our products are really good and why our services are great. And again, some of you will have heard me talk about, we need to turn this triangle on its head. It's not about what we think is value. It's what our customers think as value, our stakeholders think is value. From a government perspective, what citizens feel is value. And so we need to look at strategy from the outside in. How do we understand from a customer's lens what value means? And we'll talk about value from a digital perspective in just a few moments. So change is significant. What got us here probably won't get us there. Strategy from the outside in is the only strategy that counts. Yes, we need to have an inside-out strategy, that's true. But we almost must have as well a corresponding outside-in strategy and convince ourselves that in fact that strategy is in fact the right strategy in the eyes of our customers, in the eyes of our stakeholders. So if we take that context, why is this so difficult? Why is digital transformation so challenging? So first of all, what are organizations doing? A simple thing that we see is, we'll appoint a chief digital officer. If we appoint a chief digital officer, they'll know all about this stuff digital. Don't quite understand it. Our organization is lagging in IT. We've got antiquated IT services. We're doing lots of stuff manually. Let's appoint a chief digital officer. And that chief digital officer, usually we'll appoint them out of IT because that's what digital is all about. They'll solve it all. And in 2014, that was very common. And if you look at the graph, the growth from 2014 to 2016 of appointing chief digital officers was significant. But organizations have come to realize appointing a chief digital officer with IT background is not going to cut it. And so that growth of employing CDOs has significantly slowed. What's interesting on the left is that the average tenure of a chief digital officer is pretty low, about 2.5 years, much lower than a CEO or CIO or CFO. And there's some interesting research that shows that the growth of organizations with the chief digital officers is actually generally lower than the growth of organizations without them. So just saying we'll appoint someone, and what we also see is when we talk to people who are doing this, they say, where do you get them from? They say, oh, from IT. We're promoting Bill or Mary from IT because they know about this stuff as the chief digital officer. And I put it to you, this isn't going to work. What's a typical life cycle of a chief digital officer? They come in and, everyone's excited. We're going to move digital. We're going to put the chief digital officer in place. Then they start to dazzle the organization with lots of PowerPoint and what transformation is going to mean and how exciting the digital world is going to be. And suddenly they become the chief disconnected officer because what they realize is there's an organization that's humming. There are people doing things. They're not just, everyone's just not going to stop and listen to the PowerPoint slides or the graphs or listen to what one individual from IT is going to say. And then it moves to stage 4, the chief depressed officer. Like, I'm not going to succeed. And how am I going to succeed in an environment where people are no longer listening to me? And then we have the chief departed officer, right? 36 months later, they're either moved to another part of the organization, they're moved back to IT, or they're moved out. We see this very commonly. And one of the points of view I want to put to you that I feel passionate about is transformation. Digital transformation is not about taking manual processes and using technology to make them digital. It's about 80% transformation and 20% digital. It's transformation of an organization with a digital lens. It's not just making things digital. And this is where organizations get it quite wrong. I wanted to share this quote with you because, you know, this reinforces. So Andy Weir is the ex-CIO at Bankwest. And I really like this quote. Rather than think like a bank that's slowly increasing its digital capabilities, we're thinking about ourselves as a digital organization that provides financial services. If you think about how we regarded a bank in the past, banks used to have, we used to think that there's gold bullion buried under the bank, you know, there's cash in vaults and safes and so on. Banks aren't that anymore. Banks are big boxes of technology, moving numbers around at, you know, light speed. You know, you never see the cash much anymore. You see numbers in a particular account and then you move them around. So, and those organizations such as Macquarie, and we'll touch on this a little later, that are actually using digital transformation to their benefit are the organizations that are going to succeed. So it's not about taking existing processes and making them digital. It's reimagining what the transformed organization looks like with a digital lens. And I'll give you some frameworks on this. So I'm going to talk about some frameworks and some tools. And a lot of what I say is evidence-based. So from a design-led organization, the strategy group, we believe in the evidence. We believe in going out and not just coming up with hypotheses, but hypotheses that are evidence-based. So a lot of this work is work that has been done by Cisco, which is where I used to work for a number of years, in conjunction with a few global organizations, based on interviews, based on leaders talking about what transformation means to them, and distilling down the evidence and the aha moments out of that. And just to provide some credibility, you know, again, a lot of this is based on a platform and some tools that we like. It's not the panacea. Digital transformation is difficult. There is no easy way around this. What we're looking at is some frameworks that we like, frameworks that have been tried and tested. And the frameworks I'm going to present to you is an amalgam of our frameworks and our IP and some frameworks from the Global Center for Digital Business Transformation and Cisco. So this is tough. And if you think it's not tough, you're mistaken. Why is it so tough? So many of you will be in the process of digital transformations as we speak. I know when I speak to audiences generally and ask for a show of hands, how many people feel that the transformation they're going through is working. Most people say it's not. And the evidence is that 95% of digital transformations, they don't necessarily fail, but they fail to meet expectations. You know, silo transformations lack synergy, and we're going to talk about synergy significantly in a minute. Transformation is not an event. We don't go from not being transformed to transformed. It's a perpetual task that requires significant leadership. And, you know, we've got entanglement. And the problem is organizations are complex. We want to be dynamic and we want to be agile, but we need to do things at scale. We want to do things at scale, but every part of the organization is dependent on another part of the organization. And that itself cripples our ability to be dynamic. So the challenge is we've got this entanglement between wanting to scale across the organization, be dynamic and agile, and try and break down the dependencies or interdependencies of one part of the organization on another. So it's tough. And if you look at the research, most organizations are trying to scale, trying to understand dependence and looking at rates of change. And all of these are significantly increasing in most organizations in parallel. So scaling is increasing, dependency is increasing, rate of change is increasing. So how do we get around this? So I'd like to spend most of the time we have around this framework, because I think understanding at least the essence of a framework is important. Again, it's 80% transformation, 20% digital in our view. And I'm going to use the orchestra as a framework. If you think about an orchestra, it's a group of individuals who have to come together, all who have to work in synergy with a conductor at the front to produce an amazing piece of music. If one part of that orchestra fails, is out of tune, the whole thing stops. If the conductor doesn't conduct well and manage the instruments, the choice of instruments, and the people in that orchestra, it doesn't work. If we don't have the music and the guiding drivers to go from, and we're just going to randomly play our instruments, it doesn't work either. So there's a great synergy between the paradigm of digital transformation and the orchestra, and I'm going to build on this. So what do we need to do? And I'll just run through the steps quickly and then I'll drill down in them. So we need to determine some guiding objectives, and the guiding objectives are made up of 3 elements: a strategy, a value target, and an ambition, a digital transformation ambition. I'll drill down into all of these in just a minute. Once we've got our objectives, we determine the instruments we're going to use. What are the value levers in the organization that we need to focus on, that are the instruments of our orchestra to deliver transformation? And then it's not just the people to activate those instruments, but it's the people, infrastructure, and data that we need to activate the instruments, to play the music that's going to deliver that amazing transformation that we're looking for. Let me drill down on these in a minute, but what are we looking to achieve? In our view, what we're looking to achieve by this strategy is value for the customer, value for the stakeholders through our digital transformation, and most importantly, to embed this transformation in the organization. We see numerous examples of everyone getting very excited about transformation and change and technology and so on. And 6 months later, people are almost back to where they were. The embedding bit got left behind. So value stakeholders and embedding across the whole organization is paramount. So let me drill down a couple of levels here. So what are guiding objectives? So first of all, guiding objectives, we need to choose a strategy, deliver value, and set an ambition. Let me drill down on each of those. So we have a choice around our digital response strategy. And there are 2 key elements. We can be defensive or we can be offensive. And in our defensive strategy, we can say, you know what, it's too hard. What got us here won't get us there, and we're going to retreat from the market. We just can't, we're unable to move to the next level, so we're going to do something different. And this is okay, and I'll give you an example of where this worked really well. So that's one option. We can't get to where we're going to get to, we need to do something different, and that's fine. Second option is harvest what we've got and block disruptive threats. Let's build on what we've got. Let's protect ourselves. Let's put some walls up and continue to go as quickly as we can, using technology to the best way that we possibly can. Defensive strategies. We can choose to be on the offensive. We can say, look, we've got a space, we've carved out a niche. Let's expand that niche as much as possible using digital and occupy the space. We only occupy a certain amount of market space. Let's expand and occupy the space. That's fine as well. Or you know what? We have to disrupt ourselves. We have to either disrupt ourselves and in fact, we may in fact look to disrupt the market. So starting point is choosing, are we going to retreat? Are we going to harvest? Are we going to occupy? Or are we going to disrupt? Let me give you a couple of examples. So the bedding space. We've all gone and bought beds. As you know, it's not a great it's not a great experience. You go to Harvey Norman or you go to Myer, you go to Davy Jones, there's like 20 beds. They all look the same. The prices are really high. And the salesperson tries to convince you of the differences of the foam or the springs. They all look the same very much. And often when you place the order, they'll say, oh, well, yes, great, you'll have your bed in 8 weeks because we'll put in, we don't stock the beds, we put it, a request into the manufacturer. So Casper said, we're going to disrupt. We're going to disrupt that market. We're going to allow you to buy beds online. We're going to ship you the mattress in a box. And in fact, they came up with new business models, not only for themselves, but for the market. We're going to deliver your bed in the same day, and we're going to open stores as well that are not only going to provide beds in a box if you want to buy them, but also accessories like pillows and sheets and so on and so forth. So their choice was disrupt. You know, from a press release, Casper made its name trafficking sleep. You know, Casper, if you look down, you know, sells a fraction of a price of a traditional bed. Trendy marketing endeared the brand to millennials, which was their target market. You know, get rid of this old paradigm of buying beds. In other words, Casper made sleep cool. I picked another example in the same space to show you what Occupy looks like. So Sleep Country said, you know what? We've got stores, we've got a Canadian organization, we've got 255 stores. We're going to just continue to do what we do. We're going to use digital transformation to make us more efficient. Yes, we're going to do a bed in a box as well, but we're going to open as many stores as we possibly can. We're going to occupy the space of, you know, bedding stores across Canada and across other parts of the globe. They're not significantly disrupting their business model. They're saying, let's expand and doing what we're doing. Here's an example of an organization that did nothing. They didn't disrupt, they didn't occupy, they didn't even retreat. And as you know, the story of the person who invented the digital camera in Kodak and was told, it's a toy, why would you bother? And as we're all well aware of Kodak's demise into Chapter 11. What's interesting is Fuji was in the same business as Kodak, and Fuji chose retreat. Fuji said, you know what, the digital, the chemical business for photos is dead. We're going to retreat from that. But they said, what are our assets? What do we know? Well, we know about light. We know about chemicals. We know about surfaces. So Fuji retreated into a very different business model. So they're now a major player in cosmetics. Why cosmetics? Cosmetics is chemicals on surfaces, i.e. skin, you know, involved with light and the impact of light. And some of you may have seen the advertisements of Fuji over the Australian Open, you know, significantly now into numbers of new business models, doing exceptionally well as an organization, but they picked retreat as their strategy because they realized trying to do the same thing that they were doing was not going to get them there. So we need to choose an offensive or defensive strategy: retreat, harvest, occupy, or disrupt. Step one. We then need to go, okay, what does value mean in a digital world? And there's a lot of research that has been done to show that value in a digital world is made up of 3 elements: cost, experience, and platform. So, and you don't have to have all 3, but you know, at least 1 or 2 of these 3 to come up with a new value proposition in a digital world. So cost, is it going to be cheaper? Is there some value that this organization has done using digital transformation for cost for the customers? How have I enhanced the experience? You know, no one today wants product. No one wants a service. They want the experience of using the product or the experience of using the service. And then can I integrate this into a platform that's going to be universally accessible? So let me give you an example of Uber and why is Uber so successful. So if I take you to Uber, Uber certainly provides and purports to be cheaper. From its inception, Uber said, we are going to be cheaper than the normal taxi ride. No tipping, the fare will be cheaper, and so on. Certainly significant focus on the experience. the car can come to you. You don't have to worry about cash. You get in the car, you get out of the car. You can see the rider's ratings. You can see where the car is on its way to you. So a significantly transformed experience. And of course, Uber's built a platform. If I could travel, which I'd love to travel overseas, I can use my one Uber app in Sydney. I can use my Uber app in the US. I can use my Uber app in the UK. I can't get there at the moment, which is a shame. But that one platform that allows me, no matter where I am, to use the same technology is fabulous. And of course, that platform then branches out into Uber Eats. Uber's now into transport companies and so on. So here's a good example where cost value, experience value, and platform value have been of significant benefit. And lots of organizations have benefited from this sort of thinking. Southwest Airlines, traditionally lower cost, like Jetstar, for example, experience with Virgin or Nespresso, the Nespresso experience when you walk into a store, and platforms abound, Netflix, Airbnb, lots of platforms. So we need to determine, what is our new value proposition around cost, experience, and platform. We've now got a choice of strategy. We've got a choice of value. Now we need to set what we call an ambition, an ambition, a transformation ambition. And you're probably sitting there going, oh, it's another, mission statement or vision statement. It's not. It's what do we actually want out of our transformation? And, it should be precise, realistic, inclusive, succinct, and measurable. What do we want? What's our ambition from our digital transformation strategy? I'll give you an example. So Cisco's vision and mission, you can see on the left, the traditional stuff, shape the future of the internet, all of this sort of stuff. But they came up with their transformation ambition, which was 40-40-20. And 40-40-20 is 40% of our revenue should come from subscriptions, 40% of our revenue should come from software, and we want both of those to happen by 2020. Very precise, very digital focused, very transformation focused, with a clear transformation ambition and a clear path forward. So I'm standing here now I'm the orchestra conductor. I've got the sheets of music in front of me where I've defined my strategy, my value creation, my transformation ambition, and this is what we call guiding objectives. This is what you as the conductor is going to use. What do I do now? Well, if I'm a conductor and I'm organizing to play a piece of music, I need to select some instruments. I actually need to focus on what are the instruments that I need in my orchestra to deliver my transformation. And I'll give you this slide and this tool later today, but it's made up into 3 elements: go-to-market, engagement, and organization. So go-to-market are things like channels, engagement, customers and partners and workforce. Organizational is structure and culture. And I need to choose, a bit like the conductor will choose or the orchestra organizer will choose, which instruments do I need to focus on most to affect my transformation. I may not have time nor the resources to focus on all of them. So I may not need a symphony orchestra, but I may need the woodwinds and the percussion and the strings in order to be able to deliver what I want to deliver. So I need to choose from this set of instruments which are the ones that are key. I'll give you an example. So BBVA, very large financial services organization, said, you know what, we're going to focus on the experience. We're going to choose a strategy of occupy. And the 3 areas, instruments that we need to focus on are our offerings. It's going to be a mobile first experience. Our workforce needs to change because we don't have the right workforce to deliver it. And our structure needs to change because we need to embed IT and digital into everything that we do, especially around the customer. And the results were significant. I just pulled this off the web just today, in fact, and it says, you can see here, new record in attracting new customers through digital channels. If you look at the end, represents a 56% jump with respect to new users captured digitally in 2019. They've just come out with this statistic. So I've now got guiding objectives, I've got value levers, Now, the last thing is I need to activate. I need, people to play those instruments. But in our transformational strategy here, it's not just a person, it's a collective of the person, the infrastructure, and data. So it's a little atom consisting of people, infrastructure around those people to support them, and what data are they actually going to use. So these are the people that are actually playing the instruments. Data, people, infrastructure, they all need to work together. And here's a tool, and I'll just quickly run through this, but I'll give this to you. So this is a tool that allows you to choose. On the top, you can see the different instruments you may need to use, channels or offerings or workforce or partners. On the left, people, data, and infrastructure, and allows you to say, well, if I'm focusing on channels, offerings, and partners, here are the sorts of people, here are the sorts of data elements, here's the sorts of infrastructure that I need to choose in order to be effective. And then what I do is connect these elements, these infrastructure elements, into a network. And I've now got a network. So this could be, for example, a platform business model of interconnected instruments engaged and made running by the people, the infrastructure, and the data in a network. And in fact, what I want to do in my organization is to have a collection of networks that are all simultaneously running. If you like, in an orchestra, in a orchestra hall, I've got different pieces of music being played in different parts of that building. And the key is to combine them into an organizational transformation. But I've got different elements of networks around. Maybe it's around the channels, maybe it's around customer experience, maybe it's around innovation, all running in parallel. So what do these organizations do? What do these little clusters do in these networks? Well, I need to mobilize the resources and enable connections. If I've got resources of people, infrastructure, and data, I need to mobilize them, and then I need to connect them. So, for example, we may need to relook at the business architecture. We may need to do a capability assessment. In the strategy group, we've built a tool, a digital readiness assessment tool, to actually do exactly that. We may need to do some customer journey mapping. We're putting the customer in the center. If the customer is in the center, which is where the customer sits, we need to do some journey maps and some human-centered design to really understand what that means. We may need to redesign the entire business model. In terms of connections, the way we communicate and train people will need to change. We may need to think of new ways of working, how these networks are going to operate differently, or in fact, we may need to, shore them up with some additional funding. So for example, this digital diagnostic tool we've deployed through a significant number of organizations now, public sector and private sector, and it provides a benchmark, a starting point of how ready is the organization to actually undertake transformation. And the beauty of this is if you run it now and you run it 12 months later, it gives you, on a number of different vectors, technology and collaboration, rewards and recognition, stakeholder centricity, and so on, a snapshot of are we headed in the right place. Or for example, journey mapping. We do in our company a lot of customer journey mapping, and journey mapping are really important. So we just finished a large project with a global medical device supply company who is interested in, from a global perspective, from the clinician's perspective, from the surgeon's perspective, and from the patient's perspective, what does value look like? Because we're recreating value. You remember, value was the key issue. What does a recreated value in a digital world actually look like? So we can do journey mapping. If we're looking at business model transformation, again, we worked with a construction company, a mid-sized construction company. We looked at their business model from a digital lens, 3 hunches that they had around new growth opportunities, but also how do you embed that change within the organization? So the challenge then is we've got our orchestra, we've got the music in front of us, we've got our guiding principles, we've got an ambition, that we've summarized. We've got the collection of instruments. We've got the areas that we're going to focus on, whether it's channels, the customer, you know, technologies and so on. And we've got our entities that are now connected, and we're just about to, you know, to start the transformation. The conductor's got all the elements in place to play that piece of music. How do you bring the organization along for this journey? And look, we like Kotter, you know, Kotter, there's traditional 8 steps of Kotter. Kotter's leading change. We aspire to these, you know, create a sense of urgency. I'm sure many of you will have seen these, form a guiding coalition, create a vision. But our view is, our point of view is that standard change management won't cut it. We can't just use standard change management. What we're looking to do is significantly more than that. And if we look at, you know, plain old change, if we're talking about incremental change in an organization, in small parts of that organization, plain old change is fine. We don't need any of what we're talking about, any of the frameworks we're talking about. If we're talking about incremental change that's across the organization, that's harder, that's true, but we're used to that. We're used to that. You know, now we're using this process, now we're using this technique, now we're migrating to a new way of doing things across the organization. We're used to that too. Major change becomes harder, but also if it's, you know, in smaller parts of the organization that are functionally autonomous, it's doable. It's tougher, but it's doable. What we're talking about is significant change. We're talking about, you know, building a new orchestra in a very different way. And of course, the risk goes up, but of course, the value significantly goes up as well. So I just want to leave you with a few thoughts. You know, what's your capability to execute? You know, and again, I'll bring you back to this digital readiness assessment process. And you need to think about, you know, we're talking about 80% transformation, 20% digital. And I bring you back to that point. Have you got the leadership skills to drive transformation today? Leadership, this does not happen without the right level of leadership in an organization. And let me just summarize where we've been. What do we do? Strategy from the outside in is paramount. 80% transformation, 20% digital. It's tough because we've got this entanglement of organizations. So what do? We define some guiding objectives. Strategy, defensive, offensive, let's make a decision. What's value look like in our transformed world? Is it price? Is it platform? You know, is it experience? How do we move from products and services to price, experience, and platform? What's our transformation ambition? You know, what are we aiming for in doing this transformation? What instruments do we need in order to make this transformation real? Where are we going to focus? We can't focus everywhere in our transformation. Where are the key elements, which are the key instruments in our orchestra that we need to bring into that room for transformation to take place? How are we going to do things differently? How are we going to put that customer at the center? You know, let's do some journey maps. Let's do some human-centered design. Let's put ourselves in the customer's shoes. Let's really relook at the business model. If we've got this network, these autonomous networks, if we've got the orchestra playing, what are they actually doing while they're playing, using all the elements of mobilization that we've talked about? And then we're not going to employ a CDO. That doesn't work. We've talked about that. It's not about a chief digital officer, but maybe what it is a chief transformation officer. And we'd advocate a chief transformation officer. That chief transformation officer reports either to the board or definitely to the CEO, is part of the leadership team of the organization. They're responsible for hiring based on competencies. There's creating shared accountability across the organization and appointing transformation leads for each one of those networks, for each one of the orchestras that's playing simultaneously in the organization. So it's not about the digital transformation officer, but it's about the CTO, the chief transformation officer. So I'm going to leave you, and we're going to send you some tools from our toolkit. So we'll give you this tool, 20 questions for choosing the right strategy. How do you choose that right strategy? Is it retreat? Is it, disrupt, and so on? We'll give you some tools around how do you choose the channels? How do you choose the offerings? We'll give you a bit of a resource capability assessment around channels and offerings, and what do you have, and what, tick the box around people, tick the box around data, and so on. We'll give you another tool of, once you've chosen the channels, like, channels, offerings, and partners, the instruments, how do you work out the people, data, and infrastructure that you need? And so there's a toolkit that we'll send you a little later on today. I bring you back to the digital diagnostic. As I said to you, we've run this significantly with a number of organizations. We'd like to run it with you. It's got now some credibility. We've got some data behind it, and it will give you a snapshot of your readiness on a number of different vectors. It's a really easy but a very effective thing to do. So we're pretty much out of time. I want to thank you for today. I trust that you've asked some questions. If you have further questions, please reach out to me. My details are on this slide here. Please reach out to others in the strategy group. We love doing this work, making a difference, seeing transformation take place, whether it's transformation around the customer, whether it's transformation about the business model, and seeing the impact of that transformation, or the employee or customer experience. Seeing the impact gives us great joy. We enjoy seeing the outcomes. Thank you again for those of you who are our clients, and welcome to the others. As I say, please reach out to us. We'll follow up with some tools and some other things later on today, and very much appreciate your time and allowing me to share our perspective and strategy frameworks with you that hopefully you'll take away and start to implement in your organization. I'll let you go now. Have a really good rest of Wednesday, and hope to see you again soon.